first, we would like you to give us thanks for not having you sit here for 3 weeks. Don. You won't even give us that one?
Your camping chair. You don't need your camping chair right now.
No, we're talking about the historical precedent where you have to be here, sit here for 3 weeks. So we had a very good meeting with the governor, and I think there was a recognition that we've made a lot of progress on the major bills. We're confident that many of those will be signed. We're going to close all those conference committees up today, I believe. And the legislature, with its 6 bills, 6 out of 9 bills, have larger reductions in spending than the governor's budget in the general fund. We have $728 million in reductions in spending, and the governor does not meet that number. So we believe we're making progress on that front. There's a recognition that budget reductions need to be made, and I think the House and Senate have accepted that challenge and done a good job.
So this is really a problem that you can look at as a fraction problem. Some of you may not like that. But really what we have done and can do is solve the rest of the fraction problem. I look at it in terms of sixths. This is a problem of sixths. And what we are telling the governor is that we believe Minnesotans want us to do this in a balanced way. And so a balanced way is to use some one-time money appropriately, as we are all doing, using the federal recovery dollars, the potential of other one-time monies. We are also making cuts, as Senator Poggemiller said, and the public has told us that they think it's reasonable to make spending reductions at this time when we face such a large problem. But we also think the public wants to make sure that 1/6 of this, by the governor's own admission, about a little under $1 billion, 1/6 of the problem is solved with ongoing revenue to stabilize schools, nursing homes, and hospitals, and to preserve jobs in those areas. There is very clearly going to be a relationship between deeper cuts in hospitals, schools, and nursing homes to our job and economy in Minnesota. And so as we talked about this, the governor asked if we had a counter proposal to his letter that he sent, I think just yesterday morning, where he talked about the delayed payment to schools, the shift to schools, the issue of the Senate position on the budget reserve, and then his continued clinging to what I think is a dead proposal of the appropriation bond. Our response to that is that we believe there needs to be a little under $1 billion in ongoing revenue. And so we have not outright rejected the governor's letter as of yesterday, but we have said that to end this session and to balance the budget for 2 years, we need a combination of these things: cuts, one-time money, and a small sliver of ongoing revenue to stabilize the budget, to stabilize it for Minnesotans. Minnesotans think this is reasonable right now. It confounds me a little bit. I do not think that the governor is listening to what Minnesotans are saying about the budget. They want to make sure that their community hospitals are preserved. They want to make sure that their community nursing homes and like facilities are open and available for services. And they also want to make sure that their children are getting a quality education in Minnesota schools. So it is very clear to us that this is where the final battle comes down to, is over this 1/6. The governor remains stubbornly clung to a proposal that costs Minnesotans twice as much as it brings into the budget, and it is only for 2 years, but the payments go on for 20 years or 10 years. I told the governor I liken it to being pregnant for 20 years or 10 years. It's not a position you want to be in, and frankly, I think it is fiscally irresponsible.
We just want to emphasize again that with the bills that will be sent to the governor's desk, we have actually in the general fund accomplished deeper budget cuts than the governor's budget in the general fund. I think that's quite an accomplishment on behalf of the legislature, and we think we've done our part.
Did the governor give you any indication whether he'll sign those bills?
I think by and there was an acknowledgement on all sides that his staff has been working very closely with our conferees, and we think in general he probably is going to sign most of those, although there was no commitment. We acknowledged that with the one that was vetoed, the economic development bill, that there had been a misinterpretation by our conferees, because the governor had been clear to us privately that he was going to veto the XL Center, and our conferees didn't quite hear him. So aside from that, we think that we've got a pretty good relationship, conferees to governor, on those bills.
And I think on the health bill that was just passed, it passed bipartisanly in the House. Was it bipartisan in the Senate as well? I think the governor is acknowledging that his level of cuts would result in major layoffs in both metro, suburban, and rural Minnesota in terms of hospitals and nursing homes. That's not an ideal position to be in, so we think he might look more favorably upon this bill right now. We also had a little bit of a discussion about this whole issue of effect of taxes on the economy versus deep cuts in health care, which is 20% of our non-farm economy. And it is very clear to us that the layoff numbers around 15,000 to 16,000 are much more dramatic impact on the lives of Minnesota families who are trying to pay their mortgage and be able to take care of their families than the very small impact that would happen if you did something like a raise on the alcohol tax that hasn't been raised in 22 years, or on a very slight increase in the most upper income of Minnesotans. In fact, a lot of economists would argue that at a state level, these are the tools available to you, and they actually drive further investment in the state because of the way the tax code works.
I think one other thing we want to make very clear, the House and the Senate are very united in this sense that without some permanent revenue in about that $1 billion range, you absolutely cannot mathematically stabilize the budget. It cannot be done. And so the House and the Senate are very united on that, and it's difficult, but the cuts were difficult also. And we think the shared sacrifice approach on both the spending side and the revenue side is the right thing to do for the state's future.
So how much ongoing revenue are you looking for now? You described it as a small sliver.
It's a little under $1 billion. Yes, correct.
Any progress on the revenue side of things with the governor?
The governor's answer to ongoing revenue was no. The governor's answer to an override of ongoing revenue with some agreement on what sort of revenue House Republicans would be willing to vote for was no. His basic answer to all of these things was no, and that's why it's important for you to hear today that when the governor made his offer of his letter yesterday to take the school shift and to maybe accept the position of the Senate on the reserve, although I do think that's a bit unwise in the fiscal situation we're in, the only way that the House and Senate can do that is with the ongoing revenue in that agreement. So that is what it boils down to, and I don't know how long it stays boiled down to that equation.
You cannot, we just want to reiterate again, it is mathematically not possible to stabilize our state budget in these trying times without some permanent revenue. It cannot be done. And we think it's imperative for the future of the state to protect education funding, to protect health care, to get some permanent revenue into our base now so that we do not have to have 33% cuts in health care or 20% cuts in education in the future years.
Do you want to take this to overtime, special session?
Well, I think that Minnesotans are looking for people to be truthful about the budget situation. And the truth of the matter is what Senator Poggemiller just said. It is mathematically impossible to close the gap without revenue. And the governor would choose yet another The governor would choose yet another one-time source of revenue, his appropriation debt borrowing scheme, as his choice of ongoing or of revenue. We think that it should be an ongoing revenue source to be able to stabilize the budget for the long term and to take a responsible approach to budgeting. We have moved. I want to be very, very clear again. Our positions have moved greatly. The Senate has come off a much larger tax increase. The House has come off a much larger tax increase. We have made much deeper cuts in the state budget than even the governor makes. And we all use the one-time dollars in some way. This is the reality of where the budget is right now.
Keep in mind, $6.4 billion challenge. A third of that is being filled already with federal money, which is one-time money. And you cannot, it's not fair to the next group of legislators or the next governor or to the citizens of the state. It's simply not fair to push this problem down to the next group of decision makers, because the problem just keeps getting worse and worse. When we left here last May, we had instituted a $1 billion structural problem. That has now grown to $2.8 billion. It is not a wise decision to keep pushing that problem to future groups of decision makers, because it will become untenable for them to solve it. So again, shared sacrifice on both the spending side and the revenue side is what we think makes the most sense, and we must use this opportunity to stabilize the state budget. Minnesotans have told us that they're willing to do that if we make the hard decisions. And again, the legislature, I think it's surprisingly, the legislature has agreed to make deeper rescissions in the general fund than the governor had recommended.
So you don't see yourself changing that position before May 18th?
Which position?
The positions that you've outlined
Well, it's,
for ongoing revenue.
it's really not our position. It's a mathematical necessity.
So is it more important to maintain that and fight to fix that mathematical necessity and go into special session?
Well, Don, we think it's important to do job number one, which is to balance the budget. And we are ahead of the game. I think we started, Representative Surdich has pointed out, we are literally ahead of the game in terms of sending budget bills. So we're 3-4 days ahead of what's the normal circumstance. And I think the Speaker's efforts in the fiscal policy to do this in the open and in public has expedited this process. And I think we're starting to see the fruits of a more transparent process. We are closing these bills. People know what's in the bills. And I think that's a good thing.
There is absolutely time to get this budget done before Monday. So I want to emphasize that. There is time to get the budget done before Monday. And we plan on continuing our work on that.
Couldn't you just cut $1 billion and have the same impact as $1 billion in taxes?
Well, you could. You certainly could. And the governor's general fund cut to Health and Human Services, which is being discussed right now in room 123, would be an additional $400 million in cuts that fall directly on our hospitals, nursing homes, and the like facilities and services for the disabled. So if that is a choice that at the end of the day, the governor insists on, then I think that the governor should insist that the votes be put up by the minority for that proposal. And we will see if there's any support for that on the DFL side for that sort of proposal. It also would mean, to get to that $1 billion in cuts, Eric, it would mean that there would have to be dramatic reductions in E12 education. There would have to be more dramatic reductions in higher education than what we're looking at right now. So is it a choice? It could be a choice. It would mean very significant reductions in those areas and consequences of thousands of job layoffs. 20,000 at least job layoffs in terms of a cut to E12 education of that depth, to the health area and to higher ed.
Just on this point, it's absolutely a mathematical possibility. but it's not, the votes aren't there for it. We had the vote on the Senate floor on the governor's level of cuts in health care. Bipartisanly rejected overwhelmingly. Even half the minority caucus voted against it. Two-thirds. So, I mean, there were only 9 votes for the governor's level of cuts in human services. But even we overcome the governor's level of cuts. We have overall, in the general fund, higher budget reductions than the governor originally proposed. So this issue is not about the cut side. The issue is about the revenue side. It's that simple.
Mr. Majority Leader, if neither of you are willing to move on revenue, doesn't that force a special session?
We have moved on. The Senate had the votes to do $2.2 billion in revenue, which we believe, not only believe, it would have brought 4 years balance. We've reduced that, working with our partners. We've reduced that to $1 billion. So I think we've moved.
Which, Mary, is the governor's level. I mean, let's not lose sight of this. The governor had a little under $1 billion of revenue in his budget. His revenue proposal is twice as expensive as anything else that has been proposed, and we believe that it's fiscally not a wise thing to do. So we've moved to his level. We have acknowledged that that is what he's willing to put into the budget. We just believe very firmly that you cannot balance this budget without that being ongoing revenue.
What's the next step on a revenue agreement? What's the next step? What do you do?
We'll continue to work on it. It's early, like we said. We'll continue to work on it. We had a very cordial meeting, and we'll continue to work on it. Governor said we're welcome anytime. He's also welcome to come to our meetings anytime, and I think we left the meeting with a positive feel, just not a hope that the governor was willing to compromise, I think, is where we're at. So,
We got these.
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks.